Some stories seem so unlikely that, if they weren't real, they'd be considered exaggerations. Imagine a tech mogul, cold in business and allergic to connections, picking up the phone to reprimand an absent candidate, only to hear a childish voice saying, "Hi, you're my dad." That's exactly what happened to Augusto Lacerda. Known for his iron discipline and avoidance of any kind of emotional involvement, Augusto never imagined that a routine phone call could turn his life upside down. On the other end of the line was Luna, a sweet-voiced little girl, explaining that her mother, Julia Ribeiro, had cried over missing the interview, and that he, the all-powerful billionaire, was her father. What begins as a corporate misunderstanding soon turns into a roller coaster of revelations, long-held pain, unexpected fatherhood, and a silent genetic disease that demands courage and commitment. This isn't just a story about money, but about empathy, forgiveness, new beginnings, and the kind of love that transforms even the most hardened heart. If you ever thought you had your life under control, this story might make you rethink everything. Because, deep down, what scares us most is precisely what can save us most. Ready to discover what happens when success meets truth? Augusto Lacerda was a typical billionaire who built his empire based on discipline, absolute focus, and a stubborn refusal to be distracted by what he called emotional dramas. CEO of one of Latin America's largest technology companies, his name was synonymous with efficiency and coolness. Although he graced magazine covers and lists of the most influential men, his personal life was a desert. Friends? None. Family? A concept he shelved after losing his mother at a young age and breaking up with his father over business disagreements. His routine was meticulously controlled. Days started at 5 a.m., meetings were timed, and decisions took seconds. Augusto didn't tolerate tardiness, much less absence. So when he received notice that a candidate for an important position simply didn't show up for her job interview, something in his rigidity snapped. Without thinking twice, he ordered the team to locate the candidate's number so he could scold her himself. It wasn't just about the position. It was about principles, and he brooked no disrespect. The candidate's name? Julia Ribeiro. Her resume had caught his attention for a rare reason. Despite its simplicity, it displayed practical intelligence, resilience, and a moving cover letter. She was the kind of person Augusto would normally ignore, but something about that document made him separate it from the possible pile. And now, the supposed promising talent hadn't even had the decency to show up. He decided to call immediately. Not to understand, but to reprimand. Little did he know that by pressing that green button and making the call, he wasn't just starting a conversation. He was opening the door to a world he denied for decades. And the moment a sweet little voice answered the phone and said, "Hi, who's this?" the floor he believed to be concrete began to crack beneath his feet. "Hi, are you the guy who was going to hire Mom?" the child on the other end of the line asked. Augusto, accustomed to cold, objective conversations, was speechless for a few seconds. The voice belonged to a little girl, and he felt something unusual, his heart race. Before he could respond, the child continued. He said his mother was sad about missing the interview because she had to go out to get food. His silence was interrupted by the girl, who, without hesitation, blurted out, "She cried a lot, she said you're important, and also that you're my father." The sentence fell like a bombshell. Augusto rose from his chair in disbelief. It could only be a mistake, or a cheap attempt at emotional manipulation. But there was something in the little girl's intonation that prevented him from hanging up. Her sweetness and firmness were disarming. He hung up without another word, but he couldn't get on with the day. He cancelled 2 meetings, a first, and stood in front of the glass on the 34th floor of his company, staring blankly at the city. Why had that sentence resonated so deeply with him? He knew Julia, he was sure of it, but from where? The name wasn't unfamiliar, but time had blurred his memories. He decided to find out. That brief phone call stirred structures Augusto hadn't even known existed. It was as if an ancient memory drawer had been forcibly opened. And most disturbing of all, he felt a strange desire to hear that voice again. The man who despised involvement was, for the first time in a long time, curious. And more than that, disturbed. Something in his meticulously controlled world was beginning to slip through his fingers. Little Luna's words echoed in Augusto's head like a nagging, insistent whisper. He wasn't one to be carried away by emotions, but something there demanded answers. He searched his memory for any connection to Julia Ribeiro, and then, it came flooding back. An innovation conference in Florianopolis 6 years ago, a night filled with wine and heartfelt conversation. He remembered her shy smile, her sharp wit, and the fact that he'd never heard from her again. Stunned, Augusto began piecing together the pieces. He asked the security team to gather any additional information about Julia. Not out of suspicion, but because the idea of being a father, and not knowing it, was disconcerting. Upon receiving a basic dossier with recent photos of her and her daughter, his eyes locked on one image. Luna had the same look he'd seen in the mirror as a child, intense, curious, full of the world. And that hurt. Not only for the lost time, but for the coldness he'd experienced. Determined, he got in his car and drove alone, something he hadn't done in years, to the simple address he'd found. Upon arriving, he found an old building with no doorman, and climbed the stairs with a heavy heart. He knocked on the door. Julia answered with surprise and a mixture of shame and dignity. The two stared at each other for long seconds, as if words weren't enough to sum up the gulf between past and present. What followed was a layered conversation. Julia explained that she never wanted to hide anything, but that he had disappeared. She said she tried to contact him but was blocked by the company. Augusto, for his part, had to face the fact that perhaps his obsession with control had cost him much more than he imagined. Looking at Luna, drawing on the couch with crayons, he felt a lump in his throat that he couldn't name. Maybe it was guilt. Or maybe it was the first sign of love. Even with the emotional evidence screaming inside him, Augusto needed concrete confirmation. He discreetly scheduled a DNA test, not because of Julia's suspicions, but because his business-minded mind still demanded proof before surrendering. A few days later, the results arrived. 99.9% compatibility. Luna was indeed his daughter. And that piece of paper, printed in cold letters, carried the power to dismantle the city's most ruthless billionaire. But the shock didn't stop there. During a deeper conversation with Julia, she revealed something even more disturbing: he had always believed himself sterile. Augusto remained silent. A doctor, recommended by his father, had told him years ago that he was biologically incapable of fathering children. It was part of the elder Lacerda's plan to keep his son away from emotional distractions, and focused on the family empire. The medical lie now revealed itself as one of the greatest betrayals of his life. This was the trigger for an internal crisis. How could such an intelligent man not realize he was being manipulated? Augusto felt the ground crumble again, but at the same time, a strange hope blossomed. For the first time, he wasn't faced with a negotiation or a problem to be solved with money, but rather a raw, emotional truth that required courage to face. He was a father. And this new identity was laden with erased memories, promises he never had the chance to make, and a childhood he couldn't live through. Yet, there, sitting on the simple sofa in Julia's house, with Luna leaning against his shoulder as he watched a cartoon, Augusto felt a peace he'd never found in the glass-enclosed boardrooms. It wasn't a peace born of logic, it was instinctive, almost ancestral. And maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of something he'd always avoided, but now wanted with all his might: building a family. What seemed like the beginning of an emotional rebuilding took an unexpected turn when Luna fainted during a simple walk in the park. Julia rushed her to the hospital, and Augusto arrived minutes later, completely out of it. It was the first time he'd experienced the real fear of losing something, or someone, he truly loved. During the tests, the diagnosis that would change everything came: Alport syndrome, a rare genetic disease that affects the kidneys and hearing. The doctor explained that sooner or later Luna would need a kidney transplant. Augusto, shocked, immediately volunteered for compatibility testing. When the results confirmed he was the ideal donor, he didn't hesitate. For the first time, it wasn't about saving a company or a billion-dollar contract, it was about saving his daughter's life. And, curiously, never had a challenge seemed so simple to tackle. The bureaucracy of the surgery didn't even bother him, his focus was completely on Luna. During the days leading up to the transplant, Augusto experienced a kind of vulnerability he had never allowed himself. Sitting beside her hospital bed, watching his daughter sleep with tubes and wires around her, he understood the true meaning of paternity. It wasn't about biology. It was about presence. About surrender. About the conscious decision to love, protect, and sacrifice. It transformed him from the inside out, tearing apart, piece by piece, the armor he'd worn for decades. The surgery was a success. Luna was slowly recovering, and with her, Augusto was too. Julia, moved, began to see in him no longer the distant man from the past, but the present father and partner Luna needed. From that moment on, his routine ceased to be divided by meetings and spreadsheets, and became measured in smiles, drawings stuck on the fridge, and bedtime stories. The billionaire was, at last, experiencing something new, the silent miracle of true love. Luna's recovery brought the three of them together in a way no one expected, not even Julia, who for years had held her own. In the small apartment, between trays of soup and physical therapy sessions, Augusto rediscovered simple pleasures, making breakfast, listening to school stories, receiving unexpected hugs. The man who had never considered having a family now saw meaning in every everyday gesture. And it had nothing to do with status, contracts, or shareholders. Over time, he did something unprecedented: he delegated. For the first time in his life, he took some time away from the company to prioritize what previously hadn't fit on his agenda: family. He bought a new, larger, and more comfortable apartment, but insisted on maintaining the intimate atmosphere that had touched him so much in Julia's house. He didn't want ostentation, he wanted presence. He wanted to be the father who attended school meetings, who took them to the park, who was there every day. And it was in this affectionate daily life that Augusto and Julia rediscovered each other. Resentment gave way to partnership, fear gave way to complicity. A year after the transplant, during a simple lunch in their garden, with Luna playing in the background, Augusto did the unthinkable: he got down on one knee and proposed to Julia. There was no fanfare, just discreet tears and a meaningful smile. Luna ran to them and, embracing them both, blurted out, "Now we're a real family." This moment sealed not only a union, but emotional transformation profound. Augusto was no longer just the brilliant billionaire in the headlines. He was a father. He was a partner. He was a man who finally understood that true success is not born from the spotlight, but from the roots that grow in the hearts we choose to care for. And that new beginning, so unlikely, was the most valuable chapter in her story. Ultimately, the biggest turning point in Augusto's life came not from a major corporate merger, but from a connection he almost didn't make. He realized he'd spent years chasing achievements that, while impressive to the world, left a void impossible to fill. It was Luna, with her disarming sweetness, who laid bare a simple truth: there is no greater victory than being seen, loved, and belonging in a place called home. His story shows that the greatest riches aren't always found in safes, sometimes they're hidden in colorful drawings on the refrigerator door, in a whispered, "Daddy," in the middle of the night, or in a shared lap on the couch. When Augusto relinquished control and embraced vulnerability, he discovered that love isn't a weakness, but a strength that transforms everything around it. Even the toughest. It's curious how life takes care of putting us face to face with what we most avoid. For Augusto, it was the paternity denied that revealed its forgotten humanity. For many of us, challenges come disguised as chaos, when in fact, they are invitations to begin again. And perhaps that's where the beauty of being alive lies, the constant chance to reinvent ourselves, even when we think we already know it all. So, if your story still feels stuck, emotionless, or like it's a blank page, maybe it's time to ditch the predictable script and listen to what life is trying to show you. Because love doesn't disrupt plans, it reveals the best ones. And sometimes what we resist is exactly what we need most. What about you? Have you ever stopped to think about how many opportunities for love, reconnection, or a fresh start you've missed because you were too busy, too afraid, or simply on autopilot? How many calls from life have you ignored because you thought the timing wasn't right? Maybe you're out there trying to control everything, thinking that success is synonymous with goals achieved, awards received, or accrued praise. But what if the real turning point in your story lies in a simple gesture, a sincere listening ear, or someone you haven't even realized is by your side? What are you avoiding that, deep down, could transform your life? This story isn't just about Augusto, Julia, or Luna. It's about me, about you, about all of us who, at some point, lost ourselves while trying to be strong all the time. And the good news is that it's never too late to rewrite our path. Sometimes, all it takes is answering a call, from life, from our hearts, from those we love. If this story touched you in any way, if it brought back memories, desires, or reflections, then it was worth it. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and join us as we delve into other stories that prove that life is full of twists and turns, and that a happy ending can be just around the corner from the next courageous choice.